very much, Tom. Thanks everyone for joining our presentation. We've got a good solid 20 minutes, so we're going to get going on our presentation here real quick, make sure we have time. But I just want to thank you all for joining us. And we're going to have a discussion about photo automation in the in e-commerce studios. So let me pop over to our presentation real quick. And by the way, if you have questions, we do have a virtual booth here. So at the end of our presentation, feel free to hop into our booth, ask any questions that you may have. Okay, so let's get started. First off, just real quick, again, my name is Mark Duhame. I'm the president of OrbitView USA, and I've been basically dealing with selling, marketing, supporting imaging technologies for the last 25 years. In the last 12 years, I basically have been focused on bringing automation to e-commerce studios and hoping to solve some of the challenges that they have, some of those things we're going to talk about today. So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the evolution of the technology, where it was, say, maybe 10 years ago to where it is today. We're going to talk a little bit about who is automating, what type of companies are automating. We're going to talk about why they're automating. And then we're going to talk a little bit about if it's a consideration to automate, what are things you should think about as far as evaluating an automated solution? What are the important things to look at? And then what are some of the common barriers to adoption of the technologies? We talk a little bit about from our experience working with studios. What are some of the barriers they run across when they think about automating? And then we'll wrap up a little bit. Like I said, as far as QA, you could just pop over to our virtual booth, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that may come up during the course of this presentation. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the technology evolution. So again, back in the day, most automated solutions were DIY, right? People were rigging their own systems. They were creating their own light boxes, making their own turntables, but trying to figure out how to accomplish the task of being more productive and more consistent with their e-commerce imagery. So they were just building their own systems. And to be honest with you, to this day, a lot of companies still do that. So there's a lot of DIY out there, but it's evolved quite a bit from those days. One of the big things that has really spurred automation is the ability to do automatic background removal. This was always a big challenge for companies because being able to remove the background, put it on any background they want, helped improve consistency of imagery, which is very, very important for web stores. So the technology emerged that helped with that process of removing that background automatically. So this allowed companies to save a considerable amount of time in post-production. They didn't have to outsource clipping path, for example, so they were looking to save a lot of time and money with some of this background removal technology. So that was kind of the next evolution, which really spurred the beginning of automation. And then what happened is, beyond the software and background removal, you started to see an integration of hardware. So all of a sudden, these systems today are more full system integration. So it's not just software, it's not just background removal. It's integration of lighting, of turntables, of electronics to build truly integrated systems that really help create a more full-purpose automated system. So who's automating? So what type of companies are looking to automate their e-commerce studios? And honestly, it's all over the board. So in many cases, it's in-house e-com studios. So it could be manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, anybody that is needing to produce an image for sale online and has their own studio in-house. So these in-house studios are trying to develop technology or use technology to leverage and become more productive. The second group that's automating is creative service studios. So again, companies that provide the digital assets, whether it's stills, whether it's video, they provide content to companies as a service. So they also are looking to automate. They're looking to be able to produce more content The more they could create, or the faster they could create, the more customers they could take on, and it helps with their productivity and their ability to grow their business. So it's a big segment of the market is creative service studios looking for automation to solve their issues. And then what industries? Again, it's very vast. Obviously, fashion is a big piece of the market segment that uses automation. But it goes from there. Home goods, electronics, as you can see, hardware, sporting goods, grocery, medical. It is all over. And really anybody that has any level of volume that needs to efficiently and productively create digital content is looking to automate, okay? So why? The big question is, why automation? Why is it something that these types of companies are looking for? And here's a bunch of common reasons that we see with customers. They want to improve turnaround time. They want to improve quality and consistency. They want to keep imaging costs within budget. They're definitely looking to gain a competitive advantage. So retailers that are selling the same products as other retailers, they want to set themselves apart on their website. They want better images. Better images mean higher conversions to sales. So they're looking for a way to produce very good quality, consistent images. The other is just basically increasing the overall efficiency of the studio. And I think that gets back to keeping cost under control, but efficiency gives you the ability to be more productive. And then it also gives these companies more time to create maybe more resource-intensive digital assets. In other words, they'll take the core group of photography, say the e-com photography, and they'll automate it. And what that does is that gives them the benefit of time to do other types of photography or asset creation. So, for example, maybe they'd always love to do more lifestyle images or more creative type of imagery. Well, this gives them time to actually focus and be able to do that. So, and again, I think the big deal is what's the common denominator of all these things? And it really is time, right? So at the end of the day, all these things are attached to time. So time is the driving force behind the reasons to look at automation and why companies are looking to get more efficient with their time. And, at the end of the day, it's control over that time, right? So I'll always ask clients is, in your studio environment, are you controlling time or is time controlling you? And in most cases, time is controlling the studio, so they're always up against time barriers, deadlines, turnaround times. So time is a big, big factor when it comes to the issue of automation. So let's talk about a quick little case study. So there's a company we've worked with in the past called Refrigiware, and they're a manufacturer of cold weather work apparel and accessories. So they sell to companies that have working environments in cold weather. So the challenges they had were primarily, production time was increasing imaging costs. So it took them longer and longer to create photo shoots. Their product line was getting larger and larger, so their volume was growing. And as they did, the imaging costs went right along with that. They also were having issues of maintaining lighting consistency. And you can see at the bottom there, they have a lot of high-vis or reflective apparel that they were having issues with lighting consistently. It was taking time to be able to do that. And then they did have that issue, which we touched on earlier, which was, they had limited ability to shoot other types of assets. They always wanted to go on site to customer sites and shoot content. And they just couldn't do it because they were so burdened with the everyday work of having to create their e-commerce content. So this is the benefits that they realized when they looked to automation. And they were able to get more flexible, consistent, and repeatable lighting. They were able to template their capture workflows. They were able to cut their imaging time by 50%. They were able to cut it in half. And they cut a ton of post-production time. And a lot of that was, as we described earlier, they were getting auto background removal done at the point of image capture, so they no longer had to do that in post. They no longer had to send it off to pay for that. And overall, they were able to improve the overall quality and consistency of all of their e-com digital assets. And then with the time savings they realized from this, they were now able to have the time to do some different types of digital assets. They decided to start doing video, which they hadn't done before. Again, they used automation to achieve that. They were looking to do 360 spin content, which now they had time to do that with an automated system. But they also now had time to go on site and do more conventional lifestyle and social media content. So they were just, so again, this gets back to time, like we discussed. They had the time to get more variety of digital assets, and they took control over the time. The time was no longer controlling them. And they had an ROI on their investment in about 8 months. So the ROI was very, very quick. So a lot of benefits, and it really helped them, like I said, diversify what they were doing. So let's talk about what to look for when evaluating an automated system. So first, you got to really identify challenges you may have. So are you having issues with quality? Are you having issues with consistency? Are you having issues with meeting deadlines? Are your imaging costs under control? Would you like to reduce imaging costs? Would you like to reduce or simplify your post-production process? So again, are you spending a lot of time in post, not only time, but money? So is that something that is a challenge? So really, what you want to do is, where's your bottleneck? Just to, figure out in your capture workflow, what's the bottleneck of your workflow? Then also think about what flexibility needs do you have? So what type of products are you shooting? What type of digital assets and image style types are required for the type of products that you need to shoot? Do you need to do still images, multi-angle? All these different types of digital assets. Do you want to do 360 or explore 360 presentations? Do you want to explore video? Are you shooting flat lay? Are you shooting in fashion? Are you shooting on model or on mannequin? So you gotta get a good handle on what it is you want to shoot. So when you look at automation, you want to make sure that a solution will fit your need. And then, productivity tools. Again, a big thing, background removal and control over that background removal process is that important. So again, if you find that you're spending a lot of time and money either on clipping path service or doing your own post-production to get rid of background, you want to make sure that you have a system that can do that for you and that system works very, very well. Again, not all systems are equal. You got to really evaluate how well that background removal process works in the system that you're going to evaluate. Also, for example, is auto file naming important? You can look for systems that provide auto file naming conventions and automate that for you. Look for systems that may have templated capture and export workflows, right? So again, if you're again in an e-com studio environment and you could template workflows, it just speeds up your process. So the more powerful templating is, or the tools that provide templating, the more productive you can become, and also the more consistent you can become with your images. And then little things like, for example, is focus stacking important? If it is, look for a solution that can provide automated focus stacking. All these things that would otherwise take time, look into the automated system to make sure it can address those needs for you. And that last one, color accuracy. Obviously, if color accuracy is important, which I'm sure it is for most everybody, you want to make sure you have a system that does have good lighting, a good setup, so that you can get very good, consistent color. And again, what type of file types do you need? That's very important to look at. And then a real important point here is the skill set and experience of your creative team. So who's going to run a system like this? Is it a skilled photographer? Is it someone maybe with not so much photography skills? So you got to look at the interface and match it with the skill set of the creative team that's actually going to drive the system. And it's very, very important, especially studios that have skilled photographers. They're going to want a certain level of creative control. So you want to make sure that the tools are there for them to do that and to be productive with it. And also, you want to look at scalability. And this gets back to imaging costs. So when you look at, if you look at your volume of shooting over this year, next year, year after, is your volume going to grow or is it going to shrink? But if it's going to grow, which is typical, automation, hopefully the automated system that you look at will help keep those imaging costs flat over time. So at the end of the day, in a more, say, traditional environment, as you shoot more volume, your costs of imaging go right up along with that volume. And so when you consider automation, will automation flatten that curve and help you save money over time? All these things are things you need to consider when evaluating a system. And also control over ease of use. This is a big thing. Again, when you look at a system, my recommendation is never sacrifice creative control for ease of use. You want to make sure that you do have creative control over your process because you still want high quality imagery. You want the ability to have some editing tools. You want to make sure that you can shoot a variety of different types of digital assets. And make sure the tools are built into the system, but do not sacrifice quality or creative control for ease of use. So that's a real main point I like to point out. And then of course, software versus hardware. When you're evaluating a system, there's a lot of options out there. So you need to look at systems where the integration between the software and the hardware is very tight. Because the more that the software knows the tendencies of that hardware, for example, lighting, the more control typically in the interface you're going to have over control of that hardware. So you want to look at, how does the software work? How does the hardware work? How do they integrate? And it's a very, very important part of an overall automated system. So very important to consider when evaluating an automated system. And then, of course, support. Like any technology, when you invest in any technology, you want to make sure that there's a support infrastructure. Really, when you're looking at this type of technology, you want to make sure that it's something new. You may not be using automation, so you want to make sure a support team is in place. And again, real quick, here's our checklist of things to look at when you're evaluating a system that we just went through. Very, very important to at least look at all these different items as you go through your evaluation process. And let's just talk real quick about barriers to adoption. So why is it that companies don't automate? So they look at automation, they look at all these things they can do, they see how it can save them money, but they just can't pull the trigger, they can't make the change to automation. So why? Why is that? I mean, in many cases, they just don't have the volume, right? So if they don't have the volume, then typically they don't have that time pressure. So automation may not buy them anything. It may not help them. So at some level, you got to look at your imaging volume. It is pretty varied. I mean, I'm not saying you have to shoot thousands and thousands of images to support an automated system, but you do want to look at the volume you have and whether or not you have this time constraint. The second one is really its inability to change. Right? So we have a lot of clients we work with that have been shooting the same way for years and years, and they really struggle with changing, right? They really struggle with changing the way they're doing things. And at the end of the day, we'll tell clients is, if you want to improve, if you want to solve these challenges of time, for example, you have to change. So you have to be open to changing and doing things a different way. And then some companies just can't do it. So that's one reason they won't automate. They just literally have a very difficult time changing. And then, the last bullet there, just some misconceptions. Automation limits creativity. Again, this is where we talked about earlier, where I think it's very, very important to evaluate a system and look at a system that does give you creative control, gives you a lot of light control, gives you a lot of ability to do things from a creative standpoint, where maybe some automated systems do limit you in certain ways. Does the system at least allow you to work and move lights? Does it allow you to have complete control over camera positioning? And if it limits you in those ways, it may limit your creativity. So very important to think about. And then also the misconception that systems are too expensive. And whenever people bring that up with us, we always ask them to compare it to what? What are you paying now? Do you have a good handle on what it's costing you now? What's it going to cost you if you don't automate over the next several years? So these are things you really got to consider and get a good handle on current cost and understand the value of the automation to determine whether or not it's too expensive. And at the end of the day, it's typically not. Okay? And that's my presentation. Let me pop back over here. I want to thank you all for participating, and hopefully there was some information here you found helpful. If you have any questions related to automation, feel free to hit our booth. The OrbitView USA booth will be in there. Our team will be in there to answer any questions. So again, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with me. Thank you.